Okay. Hare Krishna, everybody. Nice to see you guys. I can't believe this is the 16th class we're doing on Vedic psychology, and I wrote that number. I was like, oh, we've been on Manas for a long time. So this is our 6th class just on Manas, okay? So today I'm going to cover the main points of Manas. So I've done 5 lectures on Manas, and we've done all the 5 senses, right? So I'm going to just do a quick review on that, not in too much detail. And then I'm going to talk about something called unintended consequences related to Manas. Manas causes a lot of unintended consequences. And then I'm going to do a little bit about observing Manas. And then I'm going to talk about something called emotional hygiene, which relates to Manas. And then I'm going to give you guys a homework that you can do over the week if you feel like it, to really get into Manas. Okay? So a review of the main points. You see this little boy? That's his sense of taste. And it's probably like, I can't tell exactly, but peas or broccoli or something. I don't know if you remember when you were a little kid, but little kids usually don't like green things too much. So Manas in a nutshell, right? Some of the main points that you experienced yourself if you were in these classes and with your 5 senses, right? That you have an immediate reaction to any input in one of the 5 senses, right? And we had very quick reactions to any input that you experience from the 5 senses, right? And all of our reactions were falling into these categories of like and dislike. You saw that very strongly with certain ones that you experienced, right? And then all like and dislike, they have more specific associated feelings, right? So Kamala brought her feelings wheel, so you can get into very specific feelings if you want. So some of you are going to that level, you know, of saying specific, I felt disgusted for my dislike, you know? And then feelings impel us to spontaneously act. So that's not part of Manas per se. Manas is just the feeling. Ahankara is actually the agent of action, which I'm going to get into soon, in maybe 1 or 2 more lectures. You know, then we'll get into how the feelings work with the Ahankara, how Manas works with the Ahankara. But I'm just putting it together for now. Okay, so the feelings impel us to spontaneously act, and then if we like something, we act in this way so we can get it, so we can possess it. And if we dislike it, we try to reject it. How can we avoid it? How can we reject it? Okay? So Manas, as we know, is very emotional, and it cannot control its own self. So that's the funny thing about Manas. So the 5 senses are the gateway to suffering, right? When we get what we like, we feel so happy about that, you know? But it doesn't last long, and then we're always looking for a new shot of happiness. And then when we get what we don't like, we suffer. Even though when we get what we like, we suffer too, right? Babaji talks a lot about that. So remember the parrot, and one of the videos I showed of that parrot who was going crazy when the owner was jumping on his cage? So I called that unhinged Manas. It's like out of control. So he was like volatile and unsteady and spontaneous, right? But that's all Manas, you know, it's not just the parrot. And it has no ability to deliberate upon these unintended consequences of our actions. Manas just acts. It doesn't think, oh, I wonder if that's a good idea, right? That was one of the points I was making. So I'm going to tell you a story just to drive home this point of unintended consequences, okay? I'm calling it the light bulb story. So this is a true story about my sister Julie from when I was a kid. So Julie was 4 years younger than me, and her bedroom was right next to mine. And she was very quiet. She was an introvert, and she was very agreeable. You know, it was fun to have her as a little sister because she never like pushed back. I have 3 younger sisters, but Julie was like the best because she was like, okay, sure, okay. The other 2 sisters, especially the one 2 years younger, we were just like rams, locking horns all the time, you know, but Julie was very easy, and she loved to read, you know, so she stayed out of, you know, all of our ways, and so she was quite perfect in terms of the beginning part of her story. But the kind of downside about Julie, which is not bad, but she was forgetful. So she would often forget to turn off the lights when she left her room. So she was kind of like absent-minded, and she was often caught up in her own world, actually, which a lot of kids are, right? They have like a make-believe world in their head. So she was kind of like that. And she loved, she also was very spontaneous, right? So she would love to drink coffee. And she was young, and she would like to drink like milky, sugary coffee with my mom. So funny. And so my mom would let her do it. And so whenever she would hear the sound of like the coffee maker going, you know, and she would smell like, oh, that, I think it was probably like Folgers cheap drip coffee, or this is way before the days of Starbucks, you know, but some sort of instant coffee, you know, that she would make, not Italian style, nice espresso, it wasn't like that. But anyway, she still liked that smell. And so she would go running She would just drop whatever she was doing, which was usually reading or playing with her cat. Those are her two things, you know? And she would run and go get that coffee, and she would sit with my mom. And I remember I'm like, she thinks she's so cool, you know? She seemed like she's so sophisticated, like sipping the coffee, you know, with my mom, and I'd be like, okay. My other sisters and I didn't really like that. We weren't into that. So that was what Julie would do. And one day, when I walked past Julie's room, I saw that she was in the bed like this. She was reading, but there's no light on in the room. She literally just had this flashlight looking at the book. And I'm like, she looks like she's out camping or something, you know? Like, why is she reading like that, you know? And she was reading these tiny little letters on the page with this little rays of a flashlight. So I saw that she was very focused on the reading, and she didn't seem disturbed. She was enjoying that, but I felt bad, like, are the lights not working in the room? Why are the lights not working? And I'm the oldest sister, so I was like kind of ultra responsible for the clan, as some of you can relate to if you're the oldest. That often happens. So, you know, as her older sister, I felt bad. Like, she's straining her eyes and she's squinting and trying to read with the flashlight. And I know how much she loves to read, so that probably was painful for her. And I still couldn't get, why is she using a flashlight? It didn't make sense. When she could use this lamp on her table, or she could use the overhead light, you know, something. But I didn't want to disturb her, so I went into my room. I'm like, maybe the electricity is out. We did not grow up in India. I know it's normal here, 3 times a day, right? But there, that never happened. I don't think we ever lost electricity where I grew up in New Hampshire. So it was very strange, you know? But I checked, and the lamp was working. So I'm like, okay, so the electricity's working, so what is going on? So I went back to Julie's room. I'm like, Julie, why are you reading with a flashlight and not with the lamp? And she very calmly, she said, oh, because Dad took the light bulb out of my lamp. I'm like, what the? And then without delay, she didn't want to discuss it. She just went back engrossed in her book, you know? She didn't want to talk about it with me. So I was even more perplexed. Like, why would my dad go into my sister's room and take the light bulb out and then leave? I'm like, what? And she seemed fine with it. She wasn't crying. She wasn't complaining, you know? So I was like, was the light bulb faulty, or why didn't he put the new light bulb in? Like, maybe there was something wrong with the light bulb, but why didn't he put a new one in? Oh, maybe he didn't have any? Like, usually we'd keep extra light bulbs. Maybe we were all out, because she seemed so calm about it, you know? So that's what I was thinking. So then I went and found my father. He was a college professor, and he was always working at home. Like, he was always grading papers or somehow involved with preparing for a lesson or something. So I was nervous to interrupt him, because my dad got angry very quickly if you disturbed him, and he was always busy. So it was like, you're pretty much going to make him mad if you try to talk to him. So these thoughts were like swirling in my head, like, should I speak up? Should I break his concentration? Or should I just like forget it and walk away? And I decided, okay, I'm going to speak up. Even though my sister's not disturbed, I was bothered about it. So I got the courage up, and I said, you know, I remember I was like shaking, I was nervous, you know, and I said, Dad, why did you take Julie's light bulb out of her lamp? She's reading in her room, like, with a flashlight. So I thought he'd, you know, be very empathetic and be like, oh my God, you know, that's hurting her eyes. But he said, he wasn't angry, but he said, and he's like this preachy professor mode, like that I wasn't his daughter, talking to me like, just lecturing to me like a student, you know. So he tried to educate me like his student instead of like relating to me heart to heart. Like, he didn't have any empathy when I said about my sister, and he didn't treat me like his daughter, and he just lectured me. He said, well, I took Julie's light bulb, and I did not replace it with a new one because I could teach her a lesson. Oh my God. I'm like, I was so surprised, I was angry, and I was protective of my sister. And so I was like, so I got kind of angry, so I couldn't control my tongue, and I said, and what lesson is that, Dad? And he elaborated. He said, well, the lesson is, he still didn't get mad, he said, the lesson is that your sister should be more mindful, and she should remember to turn off the light when she leaves her room. She always leaves the light on, and I've asked her repeatedly to turn it off. But she keeps forgetting because she gets distracted by other things, bless you, that she wants to do. So I have removed her light bulb. And she's going to have to do chores around the house to earn the money to purchase a new light bulb. He took it to that extent. And I think he was paying her like 25 cents, like a tiny amount, so she's going to have to do a lot of chores over a long period of time to buy her light bulb. And so that's why she was sitting there reading with the flashlight, because she's like, forget it, I'm going to go still drink coffee with Mom, I don't care. Like, it didn't bother her, you know? And then she's probably, like, when my dad left the house, she's probably going to be like, Mom, can I have a light bulb? And my mom would have been like, yeah, here's a light bulb. Probably is my guess how it went. But anyway, back to the story. So then I was shocked, and I thought he was so callous and so cruel that he could do that. And I said, Dad, don't you think this punishment is a bit much? Julie's only 9 years old. I mean, I think it's kind of abusive, you know? I mean, I'm laughing, but I thought it was way too intense to do to a little girl. And he said, no, I don't. Okay. Why? I boldly pressed him to explain his cruel and unusual punishment. My father explained his favorite topic, the one he taught at the college to his engineering students, and that upon which he based his whole life on, these principles. He shared, the lesson that I'm trying to teach your sister is one of the most important lessons of life. It is based on the principles of systems thinking. In particular, this lesson is about unintended consequences. If human beings could have the presence of mind to think of how their actions affect themselves and others before they act, they would make much more thoughtful decisions, driven by intelligence and empathy, and not by selfish emotions. They would think of the unintended consequences of their actions, and they would act in ways that were loving, kind, and compassionate. This would create a peaceful and harmonious person, family, society, and world. Now, I was only whatever 9 and 4 is, 13. I mean, that's pretty young for him to, but that's how he was, you know? He had very big ideas about the world and how we should behave, and he was always lecturing to us about that. So that was actually kind of nothing new by the time I'm 13 for me. But still, that's how I grew up. And so I got his point, even though I still felt bad for my sister. But I was kind of like, still, how does it relate to her? She just left the light on. Does it have to be that extreme? You know, I mean, I get your big point, but to hammer it on her, and I said, is it really that big of a deal? And I think you're overreacting. And he said, no, you don't understand my point. If I allow your sister to continue leaving her light on, I'm supporting her tendency to be careless, forgetful, unthoughtful, lazy, unempathetic, and downright selfish. So when you guys have heard me say in other lectures that I have a critical father and I have some scars around that, you can see what I mean, you know? I cannot and I will not raise a daughter like that. She needs to learn that by leaving her light on, she is not only wasting electricity, but also she's being disrespectful to me. She is being disrespectful to me. And my repeated request to turn the light off, even though it may be a small mistake she's making now, it can turn into a bigger issue when she gets older. If this kind of behavior goes unchecked, she'll become an oblivious adult, uncaring about how she makes others feel. She'll be insensitive and expect others to always adjust to her ways. She'll be rigid, lack insight and remorse. She'll always blame others instead of taking responsibility herself. I refuse to burden society with a daughter like that. See, what he taught, what he brought to the world, what he studied and got his PhD in was called systems thinking. And it was showing these connections of basically like karma, you know, mapping out the long-term effects of your action today. So he would connect all the dots, but it's a little bit much when you're young. You're like, oh, okay, I'm a horrible person and so are all me and all my sisters, you know. It was intense. But anyway, so I got his point. So now relating that to manas, okay? That's the story of unintended consequences and how I learned about them as a kid. So observing manas. So manas now is an animal instinct, right? So it's the same idea as my sister. She basically just smelled the coffee and she ran up the stairs and got it. Bless you, you know? And different things that we did as kids. But for him, he's like, look at how that maps out in life and you're gonna become a criminal. Like I remember when I wasn't doing that well in school because I wasn't interested in the subjects, he's like, you're gonna end up at the gas station pumping gas. You're gonna go nowhere in life. I'm like, I just don't like the chemistry class, you know? But he'd always map it out like that. So now, anyway, back to manas. So manas is kind of, I think, like an animal instinct. You do not think about the consequences of your actions, you know, these unintended consequences. And so you see the cat here. I always go back to the cat. But it's like stalking the fish. It's not thinking, oh, that's a beautiful fish, like it must have a lovely life. Maybe it's kind of young, and maybe there it is with its mother. All it's thinking is, ooh, that looks good, I want to bite its head off, you know, I want to catch it, I'm going to jump in there. You know, it's not thinking of anything more than that. So does a cat think about unintended consequences? No. Does he care if he upsets or inconveniences his owner? No. He just wants to do what is pleasing to his manas all of the time and at all costs. So you have, here he is. The first one says, I ruined the wig of my owner. So he probably saw that it was probably like in a nice place in the closet, and then he went and like ripped it up. A wig is a fake hair that you put on top of your head. So it was probably someone who spent a lot of money to have the perfect hair that made it look like the hair's real. And he was like biting it and ripping it apart, and he was having so much fun, So he had to go to jail for that one. Now look at the, the next one is, I chewed the internet cable. And look at his mouth, he's like, So for you guys, like Narotam and Vilas, can you imagine a cat, if we had a cat around here and it chewed up some important cable, The next one, I tore the curtains. Cats love to shimmy up the curtains and they can scratch the whole things down, you know what I mean? So it's all these things, and he keeps going to jail and he doesn't have any remorse. He's not thinking, oh, that was bad of me, And Manas also has no moral compass. I strangled a hamster. Or I ate aquarium fish. So the strong emotions in the manas drive us to go to any extent to pursue what we like, So our friend the cat can be a good reminder of manas in action. Okay, so I just made this thing up, but I'm calling it the manas mantra. In a nutshell, my feelings are more important than anyone else's, and therefore I do whatever I want, whenever I want, and however I want, with blatant disregard for what is truly good for myself, for others, or for the environment. Now, like I said before, this is mixed with ahankara, because manas can't do anything. Manas is just a feeling. So I'm linking ahankara with it when it's saying I do these things. But manas is what drives kind of ahankara to do it, right, by the feelings. And then I just gave an example. So you see this person, it looks like she's on maybe a train or something, or sitting at the airport or something, and she's talking, and then there's two people on either side, and they're looking away. They look annoyed, right? So the thought would be, the manas driving thought would be, I feel lonely, so I'm going to call somebody who gives me attention. I don't care if the people around me feel annoyed. As long as I can use someone else to make me feel good, I'll do it. Now that's not conscious, but that's actually what's driving them to do that. Manas, feeling of loneliness. So our emotions drive our decisions and actions. Maybe you guys have heard of this, I'm not sure, but there's a kind of a joke, and it says, ready, fire, aim. So it's like, it should be ready, aim, fire, but manas makes you shoot, and then after you're like, oh shoot, I should have actually shot it over there, That's manas, makes you do that as well. So the emotional manas can get us into trouble in so many ways, right? We've all seen it probably personally, like in our relationships sometimes, right? We do or say something we regret later on. In our careers, right? We end up making an emotional decision, and later on it's like, oh, if I had thought about that, that might have been a good move for me, And reaching our goals, whatever those goals may be, and in our spiritual life. Because wherever we go, manas is with us. So it doesn't really matter wherever you're going, it's going to probably drive you sometimes to make decisions that get you in trouble. So this is an interesting study I found in the Harvard Business Review, which is how anger poisons decision making. So you can see the picture, that lady's like so pissed off, and then this guy's like punching through glass. He's so angry, So it's about anger. So when people are angry, here's what they tend to do. They default to what they call, in the Harvard Business article, cognitive shortcuts, but I call it your programming or your samskar. Your samskar is just completely driving, And I'll eventually I'll show you the map of how all these 4 parts of the mind work, how the samskara connects with manas and connects with ahankara. But right now, let's just say that your manas triggers your unconscious programming to just act, And so you don't deliberate and you don't use your logic at all. Thinking, would that be a good idea or not? Or I wonder if that would hurt that person. Or I wonder if I might get fired from the job if I said that, We don't deliberate at all. Manas doesn't have that ability. So we fail to consider whether our decisions even make sense. We ignore the negative consequences of a decision. We don't also give the other person the benefit of the doubt. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, when you're in a fit of rage and you are so angry, and then after the person's like, no, actually I did that because, and you feel so bad that you're like, oh, I don't know, like you might just say somebody was late to class and you're like totally angry at them. And they're like, actually I got in a car accident and I still came, and you're like, oh, Right? Sorry about that. I didn't mean to say, you know. So out of anger, you don't ever think from their point of view. You can't have empathy and anger are not friends. If you're angry, the empathy goes to zero, you know. And then you dismiss what they call like the mitigating circumstances, the other circumstances that might be in the situation that help you understand it more, so the person's not totally in the wrong, right? These others, when you understand the whole picture of what's going on, it's like, oh wow, I had no idea. That is often what happens when I do couples therapy, you know? They're in such a big fight that they want to bring it to therapy. And then I usually don't do a session where the two couples are talking together. What I'll do is I'll say, okay, this hour is, one of you gets to talk for the whole hour. No, but I want to say my point. I'm like, you can say it next time. But for 1 hour, you have to listen, you know? And that helps get the whole picture out without getting defensive, because the other person doesn't get a response. Then the next time we meet, the other partner gets to talk for that whole hour. And so it's such a nice way to defuse the whole thing and try to understand all the circumstances that might have been going on to cause your partner to act in that way, you know? And also, when we're angry, we judge each other's behavior very harshly, right? And we very quickly blame the other person because we don't have the empathy, because we can't really see what they might have been going through. So we just do a rash judgment. And usually the judgment is coming from something we learned from our parent about how to judge, how they judged us, or how they judged our other parent, or how they judged other people. It's not that we're thinking through. It just goes really quickly, comes out really fast. So the punchline of all this about our friend Manas is that moody Manas, it clouds our thinking, to say the least, right? So the antidote for this moody Manas that we've all experienced, right, is we have to uplift our Manas into this state of Sattvic, of clarity, of peace and calm. That's the goal. And one of my very first lectures I did, I was talking about that, you know, and then I'm circling way back all these lectures later to the same point. So how do we do it? Meditation is good. A lot of people in this room I know do japa meditation, right? And that's good. You probably experience a peace and a calm and a clarity sometimes when you do that. The only problem is that it's hard to do it if your mind's already agitated, right? So the idea is that we can purify our senses, which I'm calling like emotional hygiene. Purifying our senses. So another name for it that I just made up, but it's called Sattvasizing our senses. So we can implement a daily practice, right? Where we notice our feelings, and we nurture them. So the first step is notice, okay? So there's many things you can do to notice your feelings, and you guys have practiced it in all these classes, right? Your feelings of like and dislike, you know? But I just put a few things down here. So one of them is introspecting, and you can introspect by using the feelings wheel and saying, what is that feeling? You know, what is that specific feeling? If that's too much, you can just say, I'm feeling triggered. That can be a broad word. I'm not feeling peaceful. I am feeling triggered by something. That's enough to introspect and say, okay, what could that possibly be? What's bothering me? Even if you just take 1 minute in your head, if you don't have time to journal or you don't like to journal, you can just say, I'm feeling off. I'm not feeling calm and peaceful. I'm feeling distracted in some way. You know, just introspect on what that could be that's bothering you. And if you can write it down. You know, I think it's this, and I'll get back to it when I have time. And then an honest self-assessment comes, and the reason why I wrote that is sometimes when we do self-assessment, it's hard to see our side of it. So the self-assessment is like, I'm angry, that's my self-assessment, because that person said that to me. It's like, well, usually people don't just come to you out of the blue and say, you're a jerk, right? But that's how it, at least in therapy, how it comes across when I'm talking to people. Most often people will come and say, this person is a jerk because they did X, Y, and Z. So how should I respond? And I always say, let's rewind a few frames back. Is there anything possibly, even if it's very small, that you could have possibly done to make them say or do X, Y, and Z? And it's very hard to actually get it, you know, what that could be. And then I'll start, if I know the person, I've been seeing them for a while, I'm like, oh, could it be that you did that thing again that you do? Or whatever that thing might be. And it's like, yeah, I was being cold and distant. Do you think that could be why she was crying and saying that you don't love her? Oh, no? I'm like, well, I think it might be. You know, but anyway, so you have to kind of start getting to know yourself of what is it that you do that triggers people. You know, you've most likely all gotten some feedback. I've gotten feedback on what I do. I know some things I do. I don't know everything, but I know some things I do. So when I'm feeling triggered, instead of saying, well, that person's like that, I would say, okay, that person treated me like that, but I'm like, did I do my usual things? You know, I'm going too fast. I don't have time to talk. That might make someone feel hurt or rejected. And then they might say something or do something mean to me, you know? So was I going too fast again? Did that person feel hurt because I didn't have time to talk to them? You know? So you can kind of think of not only their thing they did, but your thing too, for this honest self-assessment. And then also feedback from others. Sometimes people tell us things we don't want to hear, right? And you know how Babaji always says, just see what part of it might be true. Even if 99% is not true, is there a little grain of truth in what that person said to you? Or even if it's gossip, like what you heard that someone said about you to someone else and that other person's telling you, probably there's a little grain of truth in there, and you can use that to kind of purify yourself if you can take it without getting too defensive. Okay, so that's the step of notice. Notice what's going on within you, basically, is the punchline. Okay? Then the step 2 is nurture. So then we have to change the inputs to our 5 senses to be sattvic, okay? So we want to use the 5 senses that we've already practiced with. We've already tried 10 different things for each of our senses with. Now we want to use those same 5 senses to make the inputs of sattvic inputs increased and the rajasic and tamasic inputs decreased. Because what makes us get defensive is rajas and tamas, you know? Sattva is more accepting, like, oh, that's helpful. That's good to know. I didn't know I was like that. It's more peaceful. So whenever we're getting defensive or triggered, you know, it's from rajas or tamas. Okay? So I'm going to give examples for each of the 5 senses. And you don't have to worry about taking notes. I'll send you guys the slides as well, you know, but just to get you like starting to think if you wanted to try this over the week, okay? So like for the sense of sight, increasing sattvic inputs. So remember, sattvic is peaceful, clear, calm, right? So in terms of what you're going to look at, this is just for what you're going to look at to increase sattva. Here's some ideas. You could wear a white shirt, something white, you know, because it doesn't matter the bottom half, but the top half is right by your eyes, you know, so that's reflecting all day long. And that's kind of a quick and easy win. And if you don't want to wear a white shirt, wear a white scarf, just something right here, you know. So that can actually, I've done that with so many clients over the years, and it's very powerful, right? You're noticing that, Genova? It's super powerful, it's amazing. And vice versa, if you put on black, you know, and if you're wearing heavy black, you know, it's, when I used to work with those teenagers and the kids and teens at the hospital, I had one girl and she wore all black every day. And what was her diagnosis? Like severe depression and suicidal. I was like, well, why don't we start with, you know, what you're wearing? So I didn't say you're wearing black or anything. I just described how dark brings you down, it brings your mood down, it makes you depressed and all that. And she's like, that doesn't relate to me. And I'm like, well, you're wearing all black and you like to listen to, you know, read poems about death and dying and you want to kill yourself. I'm like, I think it might have something to do with, and so she eventually tried, you know, she tried to bust out of it and start wearing white and like light and pastel colors, and it actually lifted her mood. I'm not going to say like everything got solved, but she started feeling a little better just from that. It's so powerful, you know, the color. So this idea of wearing like a white shirt or something light. Another thing is, you know, Sattvic, if you see this room, I don't know if it's clear enough there, that room, see how it's all white and light and there's nature coming in, you can see nature and light, and it's neat and organized. It doesn't look dirty, right? And it doesn't look cluttered. Have you guys ever seen what somebody's house or room looks like if they're a hoarder? And they have garbage up to the ceilings, banana peels, they can't even go in their kitchen, they can't sleep, you know? So this is the opposite of that. This is the sattvic look, very neat and very clean, you know? And these things seem very simple and very obvious, but as we go through them, if you take these slides and do an assessment of your own living space, you know, it might not look, mine doesn't look sattvic actually. When I was preparing the lecture today, I had like piles of stuff. I'm like, oh my God, this is so hypocritical. You know, I'm like, it's hard to be sattvic in all areas of your life, you know? So when you look at it yourself, there's quite a few changes you can make actually that might be very easy to get your mind more, you know, more peaceful. I mean, how long would it take for me to clear off my desk with like piles of stuff? Probably not that long. Even if I just move the piles to another area, But just to have a clear desk, you know, I think my mind would feel more peaceful. And when do I ever do it? Only right before I'm about to leave. Like if I'm traveling, I'm like, let me clean everything up. But otherwise, all day long, I'm like making piles and piles. So that's such an easy one, you know? Wear a white shirt, clean off your working area, at least where you're seeing, you know? Decluttering. And then another thing is looking at nature or the countryside, you know, being in nature. There's such a peaceful feeling you get, right? I just came back from Florida, you know, where it's on the beach. And I was going on morning beach walks and just even hearing the waves, it's like so peaceful. The countryside, the waves, the ocean. So that's very sattvic. Or you can look at spiritual items, right? Like a mantra, if the mantra, you know, the Maha Mantra is written out, the Hare Krishna mantra, that you can look at that, or you can look at a deity, or spiritual paintings, you know? That's very soothing for the mind. So that's how you can increase sattva just with the sense of sight. And I'm sure as I'm talking, you're gonna have more ideas, right, of what you could do for yourself personally, what you like. But then we also have all this rajasic and tamasic stuff going on all the time. So even though I was in Florida, like at the beach, my mom and her husband, they leave the CNN, which is the news, they leave it on 24/7. And I'm like, come on, I don't want to hear the same news about, breaking news about a war, you know? And it's going on all the time, even when they're eating, you know? So I'm like, it's so ironic. I'm like at the beach, you know, and then I come back and it's like, oh, did you hear the breaking news? So-and-so just blew up 500 people and there's a school shooting and there was a plane crash. And I'm like, you know, it's like, and I said, I even tried to tell my mom, you know, this is like not good for, and she's like, oh, okay. But I mean, they just have it on. That's just, it's almost like their comfort to have like this rajas going all the time, you know, so. Anyway, so we want to, that's, you know, sense of sight, that's a war picture, you know, so you seeing that is very disturbing to the mind, right? Anything that's stimulating or stagnating, right? Stimulating is the rajas and stagnating, like dull and heavy and depressing is the tamas, right? So in terms of what you're looking, you want to avoid wearing something very bright because that's rajas, you know? It's like eating a hot chili pepper, you know, it's the same thing, it's very bright, or very dark and heavy, like black or dark brown or dark blue or something. You want to avoid dirty places or disorganized places. So some people might have a very organized place, but with dust and dirt, or, you know, not cleaning, and some people might have a very messy place, but it's clean, you know, so they're two separate things. You want to be organized and clean. And then also, you know, like, for example, New York City, you know, Babaji always says it's the Rajas capital, right? You go there, it's like, beep, beep, you know, it's like so busy. And they say it's the city that never sleeps, and that's really true, you know, so that's very aggravating to the mind. Busy cities or traffic. How do you feel when you're in traffic? Are you feeling like sattva and peaceful and om? No, it's like, you know, or crowds. You know, or you just think of like going to a big sporting event or something and there'll be like 10,000 people there and they're like, yeah! It's like, that's not calming, you know? Or even reading about violence, you know, you could see it or you could read about it even, okay? So that's, you wanna try to decrease these inputs. And if some of those resonate with you, great, but if you watch your manas, you know, just for even a week on the sense of sight, you'll start noticing things. Like, for example, I didn't put it, but monkeys. You know, they're so rajasic, you know? And they're around us here, right? They're running and they're jumping and they're doing crazy things all the time. Sometimes they even jump on us and grab our things, right? So I don't know how to avoid them, but that's, well, actually putting gates or nets around so they can't come here. But, you know, so there's many things that are rajasic around us that we might not even be aware of, you know? And same with tamasic, you know, garbage, just piles of garbage around and dirty, you know, and bad smells. So anyway, there's probably some very easy levers you could pull on both sides, what to decrease and what to increase, okay, for sight. So now for the sense of hearing. So, and some ways to increase sattvic inputs would be like listening to like soothing music, like kirtan or mantra chanting, or like Indian ragas, or the flute, or even just like a spiritual lecture. It doesn't have to be music, right? Listening to Babaji's lecture, even his voice is so peaceful. Right? I remember when I first met Babaji, I was playing a lecture to my mom, and she fell asleep. I'm like, did you understand anything he said? She's like, oh no, I just want to hear it because his voice is so calm. I said, okay, no problem. You know? So but that's not the point of the spiritual lecture, but anyway, the tone of the voice is very good too, and a spiritual lecture is very soothing, right? Nature sounds like a stream of water or the rain, you know, something like that. or quiet places where you feel like you're just very peaceful with yourself. Those are some ideas for what you could listen to, but everybody also has their own sense of like and dislike, you know, for each one of these things. So the way you can figure out what, in terms of what's a good like for the sense of sound, is what makes you feel peaceful and calm. Okay? And so what, in terms of trying to decrease these rajasic and tamasic inputs for the sense of sound, you could try not to listen to things that are stimulating, you know, too stimulating, or too stagnating, something that brings you down. Because, you know, if you think about it, like, I don't know, this happens to me, but if I listen, like some song comes on the radio, and it's a song from when I was a teenager and like some boy broke up with me, I'll just be like, oh, I'll just go right back into the memories of like, oh, that was so sad, and I remember this and that, you know? So heavy, sad love songs, you know, can bring up all these heavy, depressing memories, actually, that may not even be processed, that you never remember till then, you know? So the songs have such a power. Not only the song, how it sounds, but the words too, you know? So be careful with what you let into your ears. In terms of news, I already talked about gossip too. You don't realize it sometimes, but it can really bring you down and get you thinking in like a negative spiral, right? Or negative talk. Maybe it's not gossip, but you're just down. I can't do that. No, that would never happen. Or negative self-talk too, you know? Like I'm a loser, I don't know what you'd say, or I'm so stupid, or I'm never gonna get it. Or even loud music, you know, that's stimulating. It's very stimulating, and it can make you, you know, agitated. Or a sports game, I put this picture of the people like all screaming and yelling, and they're playing some drum, and they've got, you know, the blow horns, you know, and they're calling out probably. So those are examples of ways you could decrease rajasic and tamasic inputs. Okay, sense of smell. So you guys experienced that with the essential oils, right? When we had it in the class? Like, not all essential oils are the same in terms of how they make you feel, like some of you experience. It's like, ooh, I never want to smell that thing again. Or it's like, ah. And it's very unique to you. Not everybody likes lavender. Some people hate it. Even though I'm like, oh, that's so soothing. Some people are like, I hate that smell. So don't force yourself to use a smell if you don't like that one. You know, there's many smells that could make you feel sattvic. So you pick for you which ones. You know, I'm just suggesting a few that are the typical ones people like: rose, lavender, sandalwood, jasmine, right? You could smell like fresh fruits. Have you ever smelled a cucumber? How good that smells? A fresh cucumber. It's like, you know, very nice. Or nature, just being in nature. I love how the beach smells. You know, it's like so soothing. Or the mountains. You know, when you go into the crisp mountain air. In terms of decreasing these rajasic and tamasic inputs, some of them are not so obvious. Like I was thinking, like a cleaning item. You know, some cleaning items with chemicals, how bad those things smell. And sometimes you're at an airport or something, they're spraying it all over, and you're like, bleh. You know, like a cleaning item, or even like a cheap perfume. Some people, or even cheap essential oils. You know, there's a lot of essential oils that are just chemicals. And they'll say, essential oil, all natural. And it's like, that's not, you know, it smells horrible, and it can make you get a rash, and it makes you cough when you smell it. So that might be something easy to just do an assessment and look around and be like, do I have any of that going on where I live, in my room, maybe, you know, and get rid of anything like that. Or old, stale, or dead food. Old food smells bad, right? You can tell if something's rotten. Stale food kind of smells bad. Dead food, by that I mean an animal, you know, it's something dead, and then it smells really bad. You know, it might not apply to this group because most people here I don't think eat animals, but a lot of people do, you know, and it's a dead food and it smells bad. So that's tamasic. Or dirty clothes. You know, some people keep wearing the same clothes but they smell, you know. And so dirty clothes or dirty bedding, like not changing your sheets very often. It seems obvious, but all these things subtly influence your mind. You know, when you go out, it's like you have a fresh set of sheets. White, clean, fresh sheets. Doesn't that feel so good? Yeah, you know, see that even can lift your mood, you know? Or even furniture might be dirty and it feels kind of gross or dark, you know? And dirty spaces. So all that dirty stuff kind of smells, right? Okay, so now sense of taste. So you can increase these sattvic inputs by very obvious things, I think you guys know, right? Like some mild spices. You can also go online and just type in, like, if you don't know, you could just type in sattvic tastes, or Sattvic foods. And there's tons of different websites that will list, here's the Sattvic foods to eat. So I didn't go into that level of detail, you know, but it's there. It's available freely online. So these tastes make you feel like soothed. Mild spices, not red hot chili pepper, you know. And when we did it, right, you guys smelled apple cider vinegar. Remember that one? It was like, whoa, that's not Sattvic, you know, that's very strong smell. But like fresh fruits and vegetables in general, not all of them, some of them are strong. Or like nuts, beans, quinoa, herbal teas, honey or other natural sweeteners, those are all Sattvic tastes. They're all pretty mild, you know, and they keep your mind peaceful. Or like salads too, you know, lettuce and things like that. And then in terms of rajasic and tamasic inputs, you don't want to taste, you want to reduce these stimulating tastes or these stagnating tastes. So remember the exercise I did when I gave you the bean, the canned bean? And I told the story that not even the pigs would eat it, the dogs would eat it. So there's the canned beans, you know. So canned food, microwave food, leftover food. One of my Ayurvedic teachers, Dr. Vasant Lad, he said, microwave food is dead food, you know? And so there I was at my mom's house, and they're watching this news 24/7, and they're microwaving everything. And I was like, Mom, microwave food is dead food. She's like, that's nice, honey. I was like, okay, I'm glad we talked. I've been telling her for like 15 years, but glad we talked, Mom. Thanks for listening. Okay. Fast food, you know, we get food that's so convenient, that's fast food, but it's like, you know, it's either tamasic, like it's probably been canned or frozen or something for a long time, right? And then it's rajasic because the way they cook it, it's so fast. And then we're driving and shoving it in and eating, you know. So that's going to definitely affect our mind. Meat, fish, and eggs. Garlic, onions, and mushrooms, right? A lot of these we know. If you're not quite sure, you can taste test it yourself and see. You can watch and see how much it changes your mind. I used to work, after I worked at the hospital for the kids and teens, then I worked at an addiction treatment center for drug addicts, alcoholics, all that good stuff, and they would live there. Just like the kids and teens lived at the psychiatric hospital, they would live there 30 days minimum, you know? And I had to meet with them every day, and whatever drug they were trying to come off of, you know? And then I had to run a group once a week and for 60 drug addicts. It was a lot. It was so hard, and they were detoxing. You know, they were going through a lot of sweating and shaking. It was very hard for them to detox and sit there and listen to what I was going to talk about. So I tried not to do something so deep, you know? So I did sense of taste. I just brought food, and I'm like, let's do, like I did for you guys, I did that for them. But all of them were eating meat, you know? And every time I would do it for the group, at least one person would say, that's it, I'm never gonna eat meat again. Because when I would do it, I'd have a little piece of chicken, I'd have an egg, you know? And when they actually looked at it and then they tasted it without the barbecue sauce and the salt or whatever flavoring, and they just looked at a piece of chicken and then smelled it and tasted it, they were like, never again, you know? So actually, I mean, we all know that because of the spiritual path we're on, you know, we're not doing that. But for somebody who doesn't have that awareness, even just using their awareness with the sense of taste, smell, and touch, you know, that will make them very often, at least one person say, I'm not doing that anymore, you know? The last one here I have is food cooked by someone who's angry, anxious, or depressed, you know? So your energy is always going out to others, you know? And if they're cooking for you, it's going into your food, and then you're eating that. So not only is it good that we eat in a peaceful mood, but we better be really careful who we take food from in terms of what mental state they're in. So look at this chef. He's so angry, he has like the knife up. He's in the back kitchen doing that, you know, and then the server comes out and they're all pleasant and nice, how here, you know, but in the back, maybe the chef is like, you know, angry and drunk and whatever else is going on, you know, so that's sometimes why it's hard to, maybe you don't feel so well after eating restaurant food, and there's probably a good reason why, you know. Okay, last one, sense of touch. That's the last one we did as a group, right? And you guys gave the hugs and the massages and all that. So to increase the sattvic inputs, touch is very, very soothing. So you can do a gentle massage to yourself, even just to your hands or your feet, you know, it doesn't have to be a full body massage, or you can get one. You can wear very soft clothing. It really makes a difference, right? If you wear something rough and it's like itching you or poking you, or something very soft and soothing, you know, that makes a difference to your mind. Or you can stroke a cow, you know, or your pet. or you can hug somebody or just cuddle somebody like we did, like you guys experienced, right, in the exercise. And a lot of my clients, I actually have them doing something called cuddle therapy. So that's actually a therapy. I don't provide it, but there are some people who are trained in it, and that's their specialty. And it's very powerful, because if you didn't make that original initial attachment that's important to make with your mother, having somebody hold you in a non-sexual way, literally just kind of hold you. You define how you want to be held and touched and all that, if you want your head stroked, if you want to lay in their lap or whatever, but having that experience enables you to make an attachment that's kind of fundamental to actually being in a human relationship. You have to have that attachment in order to trust, right? And if you didn't get that, you're never going to trust anybody, and you're going to distrust people who are kind to you, you know? And you'll probably end up liking people who are mean to you, just like how your mom was, you know? So this is a very deep, powerful therapy, this cuddle therapy, and it's for the sense of touch. So the last thing here is for Rajasic and Tamasic inputs, right? To reduce those in terms of touch, like rough clothing that's poking you, you know, or scratching you. You could try to, if you have anything like that, you know, reduce that. Violent touch, like this girl is pushing the guy off the board, you know, or some aggressive rugby or football or soccer where it's like, you know, violent. Or any hard or sharp object. Remember when you felt that pointy acupressure tool, you know? So if you could just do an assessment. Maybe it's the chair you're sitting on is too hard. Maybe you can put a cushion under there and that will soften things for you. Or maybe your shoe has something like poking you. It's too small or something. It's rubbing, you know? So there's many different, very subtle things with touch. Maybe it's your bed sheets. They're rough, you know? They're probably... Okay. So here's a summary, just so you could review it. I'm not going to read it, but it's just a summary sheet of the inputs for your five senses. So you can actually just have a cheat sheet, a one-page kind of sheet for that. So what I would suggest is to give it a try over the week, if you have time and you feel interested, to select one of your five senses, just one, and make a plan for that, how you're going to sattvasize that sense, and see how far you can go with it. So I just wrote it out. So I was thinking like for the sense of sight, sattvasizing your sense of sight, right? So what you could do is you can make a plan to increase the sattvic inputs just for your sense of sight. And what you do is you could write out the 7 days you're going to do it for, and each day add one new sattvic input. And then keep track, you know, by writing in your journal. You could just write how any effect it had on you. Like, oh, I wore the white. My mood felt uplifted. Fine. Next day. The next sattvic input for sight, what you did and what you noticed, maybe how you felt or something else you noticed, you know? And then each day also, decrease one rajasic and one tamasic input. So that's 3 things you're going to do if you feel like doing it, you know? And then just journal any difference you notice. Like, it could be quite a bit of changes, but you might notice a significant difference, and there might be some low-hanging, kind of easy things to do, low-hanging fruit, right? So you're going to increase the sattvic inputs and decrease the rajasic and tamasic inputs, sattvasizing one sense. So I just put one example for you so you could follow it along, and you might even get some ideas from it. So day 1, Monday, would be for increasing sattva. You could wear a white shirt. We already talked about that, right? Then decreasing rajas and tamas, you could sort through all your emails, just say. And then decreasing tamas, you can organize this messy kitchen or messy desktop, right? Day 2, for increasing sattva, sit in the garden. You don't have to go on a hike. You could just sit in your backyard, somewhere where there's nature. For rajas, we want to decrease it, so don't wear a bright colored shirt. Maybe normally you wear red on Tuesdays, right? But on this specific Tuesday, don't wear red. I mean, in the top part, wear it in the bottom, you know? That will decrease this rajas. Or, like, for me, I have a porch and it's dirty, and I never mop it. I just look at it, and I'm like, oh. But maybe on Tuesday I could go mop the dirt off the floor, you know? That could decrease tamas. Wednesday, I could look at my mantra board, right? That's sattvic. That's a very spiritual thing. I mean, ideally I do it every day, right? But I'm just saying in this example, you want to look at something spiritual. And the one I picked was the mantra board, to increase sattva. To decrease rajas, right, which is this passionate, kind of frenetic energy, you write a list of things to do for the day. Because Rajas, if you can feel overwhelmed. It's like a tornado, right, with so much going on. So to decrease it, you could just say, okay, here's my 10 things in my head. I'm going to write them down and organize them, and I'm going to prioritize them. That could decrease the Rajas. And then tamas is like kind of dirty and messy, right? So for tamas, you could clean all the dirty dishes in the sink. Some people do that after every meal. They're very good about that, right? And some people let it pile up, right? So if you're one of those people who like just let some stuff pile up, like the dirty dishes, maybe you wait till the end of the day instead of after each meal, you could do that. That's one kind of small example that you might feel better about. Day 4, Thursday. In terms of increasing the sattva, instead of wearing white, you could wear like a light pastel colored shirt, right? And then for rajas, to decrease, you could take down, maybe you have like, and maybe you live in a family and some family members are into sports. You don't want to go in their room and take the sport posters down of the tackle football, but maybe if there's one in your room or something, you could like ask your husband, like, could we put that in the what's it called, the man cave, in your man cave? Because I'm trying to, I'm trying to decrease my rajas, and when I see that, it makes me feel agitated or something. And for tamas, you could clean up, like for me on my desktop, it's messy because I download this and I download that, and then every now and then I organize all the files, right? Or like at my mom's house, I don't know why she has this habit, but she'll buy the same thing and she'll have 5 of them in the fridge. So I'm in the refrigerator, I'm like, Mom, you have 5 bottles of ketchup. Why do you need 5 bottles of ketchup? So I don't know why I have this tendency. I think I've been doing it since I was a kid. So I take all 5 out and I condense them down. She's like, oh, you're doing the condensing? I'm like, yep. So I'm condensing all of her things into 1 or 2. Because it's annoying when you go in there and there's 5 bottles and they're all half used. And so that's, to me, tamasic. I can't stand it. I like to be like organized. So that's one thing I do. My seva for my mom, the refrigerator seva. But so anyways, but in this example, I could just clean up those desktop files, just organize them instead of having stuff spread all over the desktop. So day 5, Friday, something spiritual to increase sattva. I could read the Bhagavad Gita, right? And to decrease rajas, don't watch any reality TV shows on YouTube. All those dating shows or those funny shows. Have you guys heard of 90 Day Fiancé? That's a popular one. People from different countries meet each other online, and then they have to move to that country, and they have 90 days to date and get married. Like, they have a fiancé visa, but they don't know each other. They're from different countries, and then they video it, and you see them like having blowout fights. They're most often completely incompatible. So from a psychology point of view, I love analyzing it because I try to predict. I'm like, oh, I know this one's gonna go. And then I watch and I see if it plays out like that. It's very funny, but not for them, but to analyze it. When you see the personalities. So for me, if I want to reduce my rajas, I would not watch the 90 Day Fiancé. And to reduce the tamas, right, which is like greed and like hoarding and collecting, stuff, I would not shop on Amazon. Okay, that's only on Friday. Rest of the days I can do it. You can check on me, mark my word. Okay, so on Saturday, what would I do for sattva? Maybe watch the sunrise, right? That's something very special in nature when it's dark and you see the sun coming up. It's so beautiful, right? It makes you feel very connected, very peaceful, watching the sunrise. For rajas, reduce the computer time, right? Looking at the computer screen and watching things that always make your mind so active. So maybe try to reduce that on a Saturday. And for tamas, organize my computer accessories. So I have just like a pile of all these cords, plugs and adapter and the headphones, and they're like that, So I'm like, maybe that could be something. Just sit down, and that'd be like symbolic of organizing my mind. When those are organized, I'd feel clear. And then day 7, Sunday, for another Sattvic thing you could do would be like put white or pastel colored flowers on my desk. Pick some flowers. Sometimes it's so nice just to look at fresh flowers, right? And so that might lift your mood looking at those, make you feel peaceful. For rajas, organize and clear off my countertops. I tend to have like piles of things, so I could like organize and clear up those to reduce the rajas, that scattered kind of frenetic thing. And then clean the bathroom shower would be my tamasic thing. That's always the last thing, for me. And so I could say, okay, that's getting dirty now, and go clean it. So that's just an example of something very practical for you guys to see that it's not that hard to do. It's not like you have to be very creative with it. If you just look around, you can get ideas, or just look at this, maybe you can get some ideas. Okay? My last point is that there's some research about accountability, and they say the secret to success for a lot of things is having an accountability partner. You've probably heard about that when people go to the gym. If you have a buddy, if you have somebody to meet and go lift weights at 6 in the morning, you're more likely to do it. Weight loss as well. Alcoholism as well, addiction. You know, you have what's called a sponsor if you're in an Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. So this accountability and having what I'm calling here an accountability ally could be very helpful for this process. And as you've seen, like in Vedic psychology, I'm going to be giving you more and more exercises to do. So I'm suggesting that maybe consider finding somebody. It doesn't have to be somebody in this class. It can be a friend, it can be a family member, it can be anybody that might be interested in also doing this with you. And then you meet with them once a week, it can be a phone call, you know, and you share your goals. Okay, here's what I'm trying to do to Sattvasize my sense. What are you going to try to do? And then you discuss if you met the goals or not, you know. It's also, you can do it with somebody here too. It doesn't have to be a friend or whatever. And then you can share, okay, here's my secret to success. You know, here's what I did. I did this trick. You know, that thing was too hard, but I did this. So you can learn from each other. But you can also talk about your obstacles. I can't figure this one out. And that person might be like, oh, try this, or I tried that, you know. And you can support and celebrate each other's successes. It feels so good when you get something that works for you, and the other person is there with you, supporting you in that. You can also troubleshoot obstacles together and hold each other accountable. That's the trick, you know, like, well, you said that you were going to not shop on Amazon on Saturday, was it? Or was it Friday? Friday? Okay. Did you shop on Amazon? It's like, okay, I'll start next week. You know, I won't do it next week. But having a friend who, like an accountability ally who can keep you accountable will be, I think you'll have more success with doing it if you wanted to consider it. So that's the last thing. Thank you, guys. Howdy roll. Thank you. Next week will be the last Manas lecture. Let me just hold this. Thank you. Next week I want to check with you guys and see how you did on this. So I'm going to start with a group discussion. It'll be the last Manas class. So also if you have any questions, or if you want to share what you did with this, if you tried it, Sattvasizing a sense, and then we'll wrap up with Manas, and then the week, when I come back again after the break, we'll start with Ahankara. Okay? All right. Howdy,